there was complete silence in the richly furnished room. In front of the large arch stood a writing desk, behind which sat a long-haired young man. He was fast asleep, his head resting on his outstretched arms. The next moment, the stranger suddenly opened his eyes, as if he had been disturbed by a nightmare. The guy raised his head, leaned his fists on the table, and screamed in surprise that he had not died, also not understanding where he was. The last memories were of an extremely unsuccessful and stale dinner in a restaurant, then a night spent in a hospital ward. The patient could not be saved. And although now the guy was unable to fully reconstruct what happened, now, looking around, he realized that he had ended up in another world. A strange smell distracted my attention and concern for myself, overshadowing even all my experiences. On the table where the young man woke up, 2 bottles were found, one was closed, and several round pills had fallen out of the second. The time traveler grabbed one and brought it to his nose, sniffing. Could this really be the same pill from the legends? But bringing the pill so close to his face was a mistake. The medicine had expired. The pungent smell almost knocked the guy off his feet, and he barely held back the urge to vomit. Sitting down at the table, he snapped his fingers and pushed the filth away, assuming that the body's previous owner had died from taking expired pills. The guy, bored, decided to explore the surroundings. Walking under the high vaulted ceilings, he lazily stretched. Approaching the wooden doors, he was about to go outside, wondering if the previous owner of his body had been lucky enough to transition into his shell in the modern world. But right in front of the guy's nose, the door slid open, and a strong-built man with his hair up almost knocked him down, calling Master Chen. The time traveler pointed at himself, asking if the stranger was talking to him. Much to his surprise, the man turned around and shot across the yard, shouting that the young master needed a rest. The guy was in despair. He crossed the border, but still did not see the benefits of the transition. Where are the awards, artistic facts and fans, and where is the system? Something flashed in the air. Fortunately, at least the system still existed in this world. A multitude of small blue squares like moths circled in front of the guy. He enthusiastically ordered the system to tell about its functions. He closed his eyes and pressed his hands to his chest, imagining how, with the help of the system, he would be able to endlessly enjoy food and drink in the arms of his wives and concubines in the future. Suddenly, the system announced a launch failure. The time traveler fell to his knees, letting out a cry of disappointment. The system did explain at parting that there had been a failure, and now the owner had been assigned a time management system where the owner could change the expiration date of expired products within 5 years, which rather puzzled the time traveler. He tossed his long hair in irritation and decided it was better than nothing. Chen walked back to the table and reached out to the bottles, thinking that he could try to restore the pills to their original condition. Clutching a pill in his fingers, the boy ordered the system to adjust the expiration date of the drugs. Right in the middle of the room, shining golden, a large clock with several hands appeared. Chen boldly extended his hand, realizing that he could control them to achieve his needs. The hands started moving in the opposite direction, and the tablet started to give off a fresh scent. The time traveler was incredibly happy about this, because now there shouldn't be any problems. It seemed that the pills were meant for condensation to increase cultivation level. Chen threw one into his mouth to improve his condition. At that very moment, he felt an extraordinary spiritual uplift. The space around him narrowed. The guy smiled joyfully, and lightning and sparks of blue flowers appeared in the air. The surge of energy was so strong that Chen raised his hands in triumph, confident that everything would go well. But at the same time, the time traveler sighed dejectedly. One pill was not enough. The system was again ordered to return the expiration date of the remaining pills for another 5 years. The clock hands started moving. The time traveler continued to eat. He knew from the memories of his body that this person was stuck at the very beginning of development. His parents were great landowners of the noble king's kingdom, but for some reason the owner of the body had no talents, so there was no development. His peers laughed, made fun of him, and called him a weakling. Chen felt a jolt and once again felt dejectedly aware that he had failed. The clock hands kept turning back time. It was imperative to continue taking the pills. The time traveler bared his teeth. He swallowed 5 pills at once, but still did not begin to develop. Probably this body really does not have natural abilities. As if intoxicated, the young man suddenly extended his hand and sternly ordered the system to extend the expiration date of the drugs for another 5 years. Finally, punching the wall, Chen realized that it was useless to just swallow the pills and went outside. He saw that the owner of the body had a sworn sister, Chen Yan, the only one who served the Chen residence. Lost in thought, the young master heard someone talking from the side, a young voice bragging to his brothers that he had moved to the 7th stage of the Yuan Condensing Kingdom. His companions began to congratulate their brother. Chen turned around, still thinking. For the Yuan kingdom to prosper, it was necessary to create a development base, a solid foundation through the basic breathing techniques. The previous owner practiced these techniques since childhood for 10 years. He has no talent and does not have the genius of his parents. The guy decided that he should try to adjust the data for 5 years for all things in the world. As the system told, it is possible to adjust the time of practice of breathing techniques at the same time. A crowd nearby noticed him. They thought he was looking at Yue and was jealous. Yue raised his eyebrows and snorted arrogantly. The Chen family was still unable to help the young master in cultivation. He was useless. There were rumors that Chen Xinyuan had come to Cheng's mansion to cancel his admission to Huangwu Academy due to the fact that Chen Dao had not yet begun to cultivate, a decision that was tantamount to death. Dao, fired up by the idea, ordered the system to increase the time of his practice of the basic breathing technique by 5 years. The watch sparkled gold, the hands flew, the guy joyfully shook his fist. It worked. The human mind began to fill with a huge amount of thoughts about this technique, and the increase in skill occurred instantly. Feeling much stronger at all levels, Dao joyfully exclaimed that the cultivation space had opened up again. He sat straight down on the stone floor in the lotus position, with his fingers together, and began to practice the basic breathing technique. This technique was spread for 10 weeks. This time was a record for its predecessor to study it. Now, after increasing the skill by 5 years, the cultivation time will surely increase. Time dragged on. But with the cultivation of Dao, I didn't feel it. Finally, a whole 16 weeks passed. The boy looked at the blue glow of his palms with delight. He was able to advance to the Yuan realm thanks to the increase in the effectiveness of the basic breathing technique. Time compensates for the low status. Dao walked along the pavement through the stone arch. He knew that there would be a big show at Chen's estate today, and this was the reason for the death of his predecessor, who ate expired pills. Meanwhile, in the main hall of the Chen estate, many nobles had gathered, and on the dais in the center on a high throne sat a stately girl. She sharply spoke out against some decision. Yuan, with a sly smile, convinced Yan that until the master and his wife returned, junior brother Dao was not suitable for this path of cultivation. Yan replied irritably that the master and his wife had built this house, even after their disappearance. The entire territory belonged to the heir. Yuan had no right to deprive him of his place in the Huangwu Academy. Moreover, the girl's warlike nature did not allow her to remain silent. She also told the man that, being orphans from Dao, the master's family had taken them in. Without them, the children had died of hunger and frozen to death on the street. Yuan, hurt by the young heiress's words, angrily raised his voice at her, saying that she could not solve the estate's problems alone. She had already been accepted into the academy. Several men from the crowd supported Yuan, calling Yan spoiled and Dao an unworthy student of the academy. But the girl, rising from the throne, declared that after the disappearance of the owners, the city was left without a leader, and called the men schemers. Yuan jumped up from his seat when Yan accused him of aiding her in getting a place on the admissions committee. He shouted that the girl was not the only one dictating the rules in the family, and that only the young master and his lack of ability could be blamed for the problems. As if by magic, after these words, Dao entered the hall, grinning and asking why he had no abilities. He stopped at a distance from the dais, but so that all the advisors could see him, and announced that he had arrived on time. Yan asked worriedly what her brother was doing here. He replied with a smile that he had only come to look around. In fact, the time traveler was not so frivolous, and knew that all the squabbles were happening because of him. After their parents went missing, Yan's older sister took care of her brother like a mother. She stands firm against stubborn advisors and takes care of the family's affairs, protecting it. The sister ran up to her brother, asking him to leave, because the girl would take care of everything herself. Yan felt that she had to force the young man to leave to prevent others from using his cultivation as leverage. But the doors slammed shut with a crunch, and Yuan, smiling evilly, suggested that they talk about pressing matters since Dao was here. He, taking advantage of the moment, deftly ran up the dais and sat down on the throne, propping his chin up with his fist. He was surrounded on both sides by frowning Yuan and Yan. His sister crossed her arms over her chest and demanded that her younger brother obey her. When Yan made scary eyes, hinting at danger, her brother suddenly grabbed the girl by the wrist. All the irritation left the girl's face. She was surprised by this gesture because Dao had never shown such courage before. The time traveler surprised her even more by saying that his sister should relax and trust him. Dao leaned back on his throne and waved his hand, calling for those who wished to speak. Yuan addressed the young man by name. but he rudely interrupted him, ordering him to address himself as nothing other than young master. The man recoiled from the unexpected change in the character of the previously gentle son of the master. He knitted his eyebrows together, seriously informing about the proposal to refuse admission to the academy because the heir had not yet begun his cultivation. Dao laughed, asking who here was so outstanding that he would take his place. The man hit his chest, imagining Liu Tinger as a good option, young and with an excellent upbringing. Yan reproached Yuan for the matchmaking because the girl was his fiancée, and the advisor completely lost his shame. Dao supported him, saying that the man has no conscience. This completely infuriated the advisor. He almost attacked the brother and sister with his fists, shouting that Tinner had started cultivating 5 years ago and could compare to the young master. Dao rose from the throne, telling Yuan the reason why the Tang dynasty provided free education to aristocrats. They were rewarded for their contributions to the dynasty. And how is Yuan's fiancé going to study there, not being from a rich family? Yuan, drooling, shouted in Dao's face that Tinger had joined the family, and after studying at the academy, her contribution would be greater than that of someone who had not yet started cultivating. One of the advisors drew attention to himself, folding his arms. He predicted the decline of the aristocratic Huoseihold and hoped that the young master would think about his family. The gray-haired man raised his eyebrows and also expressed hope for the imminent return of the master and his wife. Yan tried to defend her brother again, shouting that the men were conspiring to intimidate him. Let them attack her. Yan, holding his head high, declared his unwillingness to argue with the girl about such nonsense. Pointing his finger at Dao unceremoniously, he said that the young master could not begin his cultivation and was to blame for his own uselessness. Dao, grinning, asked mysteriously why he couldn't start. The man just laughed at this statement, humiliating the time traveler. He did not remain silent and simply decided to demonstrate his own abilities. The fiery flashes that swirled around his entire body proved to the advisors that the young master had begun his cultivation. Yan almost cried with happiness at the sight of her brother, who had begun his development. The young man smiled tenderly and asked forgiveness from his sister, whom he had made suffer all these years. The girl, smiling, asked not to apologize. She was incredibly happy about what happened. Dao assured Yan that he would become better and would no longer be so worthless, but the girl convinced her brother that she believed in him. They turned in unison to the dumbfounded Yuan, asking if he had anything to say. The man reacted very violently to this appeal. He was deeply offended. Dao laughed and said that the advisor was not worthy of the name Chen. Yuan, trying not to lose his dignity, smirked and tried to humiliate the young man again, because he had not been able to show the ability to cultivate for so many years and had only learned to talk nonsense. He addressed those present, mockingly drawing attention to the slow development of abilities, which would probably continue in the future. Yuan concluded his speech by saying that the young master should not enter the academy. Yan couldn't stand to see this and activated her magic, angrily addressing the advisor who dared to bully her brother. An enraged Yuan challenged the girl to shut up, as they were discussing official matters, but there was no stopping her. Yan waved her hand, and the advisor was thrown several meters away from the place where he had just stood. The man was so taken aback that he couldn't find anything to say, only his chest heaved heavily from the tension. The stunned people present began to discuss the cultivation abilities of the young heiress, who managed to push Yuan away, and the girl asked them what they thought of her brother. To her surprise, the men supported the idea of Dao joining the academy. Now that the master was absent, the men close to him had to do everything to support Dao. But one of the advisors scratched his chin and did not change his mind, as he believed that the young master's cultivation progress was too slow, and the Chen family might remain in decline. Yuan, with a mean smile, proposed to arrange a duel between Tinner and Dao. The winner would be allowed into the academy. He added, looking sarcastically at the young master, that he would not be able to refuse, following the rules. Yan stepped forward, stating that the Dao was just beginning to be mastered, while Tinger had a lot of experience behind her. The brother took her by the hand, sternly telling her that he would have to decide this issue himself, and that his sister would let him figure it out. The young man agreed to hold the fight, but set one condition: he would choose the location himself. Yuan exclaimed that there was a month left before the start of classes at the academy. The battle should take place during this period. Dao, after a moment of silence, agreed to these conditions. A little later, when the advisors left the hall, Yan carefully warned her younger brother about the upcoming defeat, because the advisor had turned him against himself. Dao smiled, assuring that he could defeat Tinner. The girl looked at her brother in surprise, not knowing what to say, because he had never behaved like this before. Still, Yan had always believed in her brother, and she wasn't going to change anything now. Dao remembered the face of the advisor at the moment of their argument. He must have had unconditional faith in his bride, and the guy had no choice but to agree to fight even after such a short time. The time traveler decided to find out more about those strange pills and asked his sister directly where they came from. The girl cautiously replied that Dao himself had bought them. Smiling awkwardly, the young man scratched the back of his head and tried to justify himself. Recently, he had completely forgotten about everything due to the advancement of his cultivation. The sister added that the pills were sold to the heir by Master Yue from the Qin Prince's mansion. Besides, the brother spent a lot of money on the purchase, Yuan knows about it, and will definitely blackmail Dao. Suddenly, the time traveler remembered something about Yu. If the predecessor's memories are true, then he had a good relationship with the master. But after her parents disappeared, Yue stopped communicating with the young man, even selling expired pills. Yan giggled. She thought the pills were effective and helped in advancing her cultivation. Dao didn't hide the fact that the pills had expired, raising his fist in the air. He accused Master Yue of deceiving him. One can even conclude that she is the direct culprit of her predecessor's death. The sister thought hard. If it is as brother says, then even Qin allows himself to play with the Chen family. Is this because there is no leader? However, Dao believed that the decline of the family only allowed the true faces of many of those close to him to be seen. The elder sister was delighted by her brother's announcement that he would now cultivate vigorously. This showed how much he had matured. Dao walked out of the hall and stopped in front of the tall library building in the courtyard. Now he needs to practice the technique and increase his strength. Those present in the room were surprised as soon as they saw the young master. He practically never visited the library. The young man only nodded briefly in response to numerous greetings. He quickly walked over to the wooden shelf with scrolls and notes. The first thing the newcomer took into his hands was the teaching of the Fist of the Falling Star. The young men in the library were quietly talking. One of the guys asked the other why he was so polite to the young gentleman. They answered him that the master had begun to cultivate, of course, he needed to behave in accordance with his status. But the one who started the argument said that the young master was overrated. His development was weak, and his training would probably be very slow. The interlocutor could not help but agree. After all, low abilities and late development will greatly affect learning. Dao, meanwhile, studied the notes, deciding that the Falling Star Fist was ideal for him, as it was known for its speed and ease of mastering. The time traveler immediately ordered the system to increase the time it takes to study the technology by 5 years. The clock, shining with gold, habitually started the movement of its hands. Dao was happy, despite his insignificant abilities. With the advent of the system, his mind was filled with the knowledge of the practice of the Fist of the Falling Star. And now he must increase the training time for all technologies presented in the library by 5 years. The system began to increase the training time of Windy Cloud Steps, Butterfly Sword, Life-Capturing Leg, and many other techniques. Dao fell into a trance while the system did its job and loaded numerous pieces of knowledge into the boy's mind. The crowd looked in amazement at the meditating master surrounded by books, not believing that he was actually practicing so many techniques at once. Gradually, even more people gathered to look at this curiosity. They mocked the volume of recordings and techniques, deciding that Dao was simply shocking the public. Finally, the time traveler woke up and stretched. Now he had mastered the powerful techniques stored in the library. Just as the guy was about to open the door, a voice behind him ordered him to stop. Dao turned around in surprise and saw a small crowd in front of him, led by Yue, who was looking at him with an arrogant expression. The time traveler immediately recognized him, and the others present standing at a distance began to whisper. Dao raised an eyebrow, pretending to have misheard the bully's words. He, feeling that he could do anything, put his hands on his hips and came close to the master, repeating his order. In response, the time traveler gave the impudent fellow a resounding slap in the face. Dao reminded that he was a young master and no one had the right to detain him. Insulted and humiliated, Yue held his cheek, screaming that the guy dared to hit him. But he decided to put the impudent fellow in his place, demanding an apology, and Yue received another blow with double the force. Tears welled up in the corners of Yue's eyes. He cursed and bowed, apologizing to the young master for his ignorance. Dao smirked, stating that they could now talk business. Looking at Yue bowing before him, the time traveler remembered that he had insulted his predecessor in the past. The boy exclaimed that he was in charge of the library, and the young master made a mess. According to the rules, visitors should leave only after cleaning. Bowing low over Yue, Dao reminded him with a smirk that it was not for him to discuss such rules, since this library belonged to the Chen family. Seeing the veins on his opponent's face bulge, The time traveler smiled and suggested that the warlike guy attack first. He bared his teeth and asked what the young master meant. Dao openly invited Yue to attack him in broad daylight to justify his arrogant actions. Excited by such a statement, the opponent could not believe that he was allowed to fight openly with the young master. But he waved his hand, mockingly calling for an attack. Yu flexed his fists, thinking about how a Dao who had just entered the path of cultivation could be so arrogant. He raised his hand back and let lightning burst out from his body. Now everyone would see his new technique, the Fire Cloud Fist basic stage. Dao grinned and mirrored this technique exactly. The stunned Yue did not expect such a reception from a weak master at all. Swinging, the time traveler easily threw his opponent back with the help of the technique, causing the crowd to scream in amazement. They grabbed the shocked and angry Yue by the arms. He couldn't believe that at the beginning of the path of cultivation one could master the technique to such a degree. Dao shook his head, asking if the boy didn't believe him. He pointed his finger at those present, declaring that it was time for scum like them to stop being cowards and attack him. The tall blonde man, angry, was about to demonstrate his hurricane legs, a technique he had been training for 3 years. However, he was unable to fully demonstrate his skills, as Dao's leg deftly knocked the young man out. The blonde flew back towards the shelves, raising clouds of dust with his own body. Following him, another warrior decided to attack the young master, and with a cry he found himself in the air with the image of a furious ice tiger above him. Dao grinned and showed his opponents the real technique of attacking a tiger with the help of a fire animal. The sharp fangs of his tiger sank into the paw of the attacking ice tiger, who was pinned to the floor. The warrior fell flat on the floor, coughing up blood. Those present could not believe their eyes because they knew that little time had passed, and the young master had already improved his technique so much. Dao put his hands behind his back, looked at his defeated opponents, and asked if they were satisfied. The young men, without getting up, began to bow to the young master, sitting on their knees. The time traveler looked menacingly at the others, as if asking whether they would dare to do anything. But they began to beat their chests with their fists, convincing Dao that they were completely confident in his strength. The guy knew that he had to take extreme measures to unite people and stop the war. When the library was empty, a respected old man of majestic appearance entered. Seeing the pile of notes, he immediately understood what was going on and turned to the master and madam. Their son had blossomed after so many years. They would certainly be proud of him. Dao walked around the courtyard of the estate, thinking about what to do next. Seeing the young master, a man ran up to him shouting, folding his hands in a welcoming gesture. The time traveler turned around and asked what was going on. He held a skillful box in his hands and exclaimed that Master Yue had sent the pills again. Dao stared at the outstretched item with his mouth slightly open. The pills smelled noticeably sour. The guy immediately felt sick. He asked what it was. The servant relayed the master's words. These are freshly prepared preserved yuan pills that enhance mental abilities and aid focus. Dao grabbed the box and turned to leave, then asked the servant to thank the master on his behalf. However, the servant was not going to let his master go so easily. He shouted after them that the yuan-preserved pills were more expensive than the previous ones and cost 500 gold coins each. To this, the time traveler ordered to convey to Yue a request to sell all types of pills. In the future, he will pay for everything at once. The servant bowed and promised to do everything. Dao rolled his eyes, mentally scolding the master who thought he was an idiot. How could anyone earn the amount he was asking for these pills in their entire life? At home, he poured the pills out onto the table and ordered the system to reset their expiration date to 5 years. The hands obediently moved in the opposite direction. The boy reached out for some of the improved pills. He saw that only 3 had managed to restore their quality. Probably the others had been stored for so long that even rewinding the expiration date did not work. The time traveler threw all the pills into his mouth at once. A powerful cultivation fire magic surrounded his body. Yuan condensation exceeded the 5th stage. The young man thought with delight that these canned tablets were different from the rest. It would take at least a year for an ordinary cultivator to reach the 5th stage. There was a knock at the door. Dao hurried to open it. Yan stood at the threshold. The guy happily greeted his sister. The girl was holding a box in her hands. She heard about what happened in the library and came specifically to see her brother. He smiled, scratching the back of his head, assuring that everything was fine. Yan excitedly approached her brother, feeling that his chi aura had increased significantly. Did that mean that his cultivation had also increased again? Dao smiled and confirmed the rise of yuan condensation to the 5th stage. Yan almost dropped the box on the floor from joy, jumping up and down. The girl embraced her burden with one hand. She saw the improvements and was convinced that Dao was an unusual genius, a true son of his parents. Now she had no doubt that Dao would be able to defeat Tinner, and brought him the pills she had bought with the prizes she had saved up from the academy, her own money. At first, the time traveler tried to refuse, but the headstrong Yan didn't want to hear anything. She added that the vile Yuan had blocked the Chen family's accounts, and Master Yue was even selling the guy expired pills. Dao worriedly asked Yan what would happen to her if the girl gave him these pills, since cultivation required a lot of resources. The girl, smiling, convinced her brother not to worry because everything she did was part of her older sister's duties. Turning around, Yan said that she was going to Mount Yuanlin to get the UN Condensation Activation Stone. Then, the guy would successfully attune with it and move to a new level of cultivation improvement. Dao tried to stop his sister because Mount Yuanlin was considered very dangerous. She shrugged and replied that everything was fine. The girl was not an ordinary cultivator. The time traveler made a cute face, clasping his hands in a gesture of supplication. But even this did not stop Yan from leaving. She only said as a parting word that her brother needed to take his pills and wait for her return. A golden chariot with several passengers stopped at Mount Yuanlin. The second prince, the emperor's son, and his entourage. Yan knelt in front of the chariot, clutching a sword in her hands. The second prince introduced her to the beast of all the Yuanling mountains, Zhengning Shou, who guards the highest level stone on the mountains. The prince, in response to the girl's indignant cries, said that he had come here not only to help her in battle, but that he needed a bride to strengthen his position in the eyes of the emperor's father. He pointed his finger at the girl, declaring that she was one of the most outstanding people in centuries and was the best fit for him. The man assured that he fell in love with the girl at first sight. With her status, talent, and beauty, they would become an ideal couple. Yan stamped her foot, shouting that this was completely impossible. But the prince convinced her that he was very patient and could wait. He waved his long hair and glanced at the huge beast, saying that it would take the stone for itself and swallow it. And if that happens, Shaw will simply disappear. The young lady was not going to give up so easily and immediately rushed at the monster. She cursed. The technique she used wasn't much help in fighting such a giant. Shu waved his paw and pushed Yan back. She grouped herself and landed successfully on her feet, the hem of her dress falling gracefully after her. The girl clapped her hands, and a majestic, magical female figure of extraordinary beauty appeared behind her. Yan used the heavenly fairy seal technique. The second prince watched the unfolding battle with rapture and did not interfere. Scratching his chin, he thought with satisfaction that Yan really lived up to his reputation. This was the first time he had witnessed a heavenly art that had emerged from fantasy. The prince's confidant said that such power rarely manifests itself, even now, when the image of the girl's heavenly power has not yet been fully formed. The old man advised the prince to win this person in order to become like the sun in the sky with incredible achievements. Meanwhile, the rivals waited for someone to make the first move and watched each other carefully. Finally, Yan raised her right hand and straightened it, ordering the image to detain the enemy. The woman's beautiful face lit up with a bright light. She was ready to carry out the order of her mistress. The beast stood on its hind legs, trying to increase the success of its attack. He threw his head back and growled loudly and shrilly, revealing rows of sharp teeth. The monster created a dangerous field around itself and began to transform. Yan immediately realized that this was a bad sign, and the next moment the monster grew huge golden wings and rushed forward. The girl stepped back, stunned by what she saw. Even the second prince and his minions did not expect this. The beast, opening its mouth wide, put its paws forward and flew straight at the cultivator. She, controlling the magical image, forced the figure in the air to repeat her movements. The woman put her hands forward, defending herself from attack. The beast flew through it, making a hole in the translucent entity. Yan looked ahead in shock, as well as at the trail left by the monster. The prince's follower exclaimed that this was no ordinary show beast. It had the blood of the phoenix god flowing through it. Yan was not Shao's opponent, since her heavenly power image had not been formed. If their battle continues, the girl will undoubtedly lose. After these words, the beast swung and struck with a powerful paw at the place where Yan stood. The prince, seeing that the girl had managed to regroup, ordered his followers to immediately help his bride obtain the UN spiritual stone. One of them tried to object to the ruler, suggesting to wait until Yan was in a critical situation to accept the prince's terms. But he was not stupid and recognized the uniqueness and pride of the girl. She would prefer to die than bow before him. The man ordered his minions to help Yan, and perhaps then he would be able to conquer her. The old men obediently carried out the order, hanging directly over the beast. The lady looked at the unexpected help in surprise. The men fired two powerful beams of purple and yellow at the beast. After some time of fighting, Yan managed to jump right on the monster's head, causing it to open its mouth. He spat out a powerful stone, and the girl caught it and squeezed it tightly in her palm. The trio watched as the beast flapped its wings and flew away. Such a monster with the Phoenix God's bloodline did not fall before Noble King stage cultivators. The second prince, his golden robes glittering, landed softly on the ground behind Yan. He congratulated her on acquiring the Yuan stone. Even he himself couldn't obtain a stone of this level when he broke through to the new stage of Yuan condensation. The girl thanked the prince and was about to say goodbye to him, citing urgent matters. The prince, crossing his arms over his chest, silently glanced at the girl's graceful figure. His follower turned to the prince, asking if this person was not too proud to leave just like that. But the man didn't care, because this is the kind of girl who deserves a real prince. He clenched his fist, promising himself that he would conquer Yan, especially since he had some free time now. In the manner, Chen Dao opened the box containing the pill from his elder sister, which was full of spiritual power and the fragrance of strength. He thought that even at first glance, the pill was not comparable to what Master Yue had slipped him. Closing his eyes, the newcomer concentrated on accepting the power, deciding that as soon as Yan brought the spiritual item to Yuan, he would immediately establish contact with it. The Yuan condensation stage breakthrough consists of two halves. The first is the breakthrough in the cultivation process. The second is the adjustment of contact with the Yuan spiritual item. A cultivator of the original continent spirit needs a corresponding Yuan spirit item when they break through to a new stage. For those who have passed through the stage of Yuan condensation, the spiritual stone remains. Cultivation stages require different Yuan spiritual items. These can be plant or animal spiritual items. Regarding the grade of the Yuan spiritual stone, which directly affects combat strength, the cultivator will advance to the next stage, so Dao was impatiently waiting for his stone. Finally, the time traveler announced a break. The fiery energy turned into a powerful stream around his body and disappeared. The pill from the sister was indeed powerful, and raised the cultivation to the 9th stage of condensation. A servant's voice was heard from behind the door, and the young master was informed that Madame Yan was asking him to come immediately. Hearing this, Dao was delighted. Finally, his sister had returned. Outside, Yuan, Tinger, and Yue learned the latest news from the servants. Yan had returned with the rainbow-colored Yuan spiritual stone. Yuan knew that this was the highest grade of spiritual stone from Yuan Soul Mountain. Such stones were protected by special beasts. The man clenched his fist and bared his teeth angrily. He couldn't believe that there was such a big gap in cultivation between him and some girl. Tinner, seeing the groom's irritation, asked him if the Dao stone used to break through the condensation stage. The girl was at the 9th stage of Yuan condensation, just one step away from the spiritual C stage, and this guy was still the weakest. Yuan nodded his head. He was confident in the bride's abilities and considered it a waste for an ignoramus to use such an artifact. He thought out loud that there had been a change in Dao's behavior. Yue confirmed this. In the library, the young master had learned many techniques in a short time. Tyner was worried about such a breakthrough from someone who had been deprived of all strength just yesterday. Once upon a time, when they were children, they even spent time together with Dao. But the girl always left him alone and went to Yuan to study cultivation lessons. She even admitted that the boy's very existence embarrasses her. Everyone makes fun of her when they see Tyner spending time with such a useless child. It was then that the girl ordered Dao not to approach her, because she had to improve herself, and therefore they could no longer see each other. The girl was brought out of her memories by the voice of her fiancé, who had just entrusted Yue with a special task. If he succeeds, he will choose a high position in the Chen family. The guy winked at his older brother, assuring him that he will fulfill the request. After a few seconds, Yuan called out to Yue, asking him to wait. A sheet of paper was placed in the guy's hands. Yuan, grinning evilly, assured that this thing would help the matter go perfectly. The man watched his younger brother go, then turned around. He approached the bride and put his arm around her shoulders, assuring her that the high position would go to her. The girl ran her finger over Yuan's chest, saying that she had infinite confidence in him. At this time, Dao ran to his sister to meet her. The girl immediately handed the sacred stone to her younger brother. The boy was stunned when he saw the highest grade Yuan spiritual stone from Soul Mountain. He heard that the stone was protected by the strongest demonic beasts. Previously, cultivators died trying to get it. After his sister urged his brother on, he returned home and began to meditate to gain the power of the stone. Hearing someone's footsteps outside the door, the time traveler quickly put the jewel back in the box. There was a servant standing at the threshold, asking the young master to hurry to Madame Yan. Dao impatiently asked to be shown where to go. He went after the servants and did not see that a mysterious figure in a mask was hiding nearby. Someone knew that Dao would leave his home and sneaked into his house. Yue, standing at the table, chuckled out loud. Dao was such an idiot. The young man carefully took the box with the stone in his hands, not hearing how the door slowly opened. He was brought out of his blissful state by the voice of Dao, who informed him that stealing the UN spiritual stone was a serious crime that betrayed the family. The guy almost dropped the object from his hands, frightened, and began babbling something incoherently. The time traveler mockingly warned that breaking the family rules would result in the confiscation of cultivation and exile. Yue pulled the mask off his face and smiled back, saying that he had underestimated the guy. He tore off his cloak, not letting go of the box. He didn't care about breaking all the rules. Dao slowly reached into his bosom, distracting the thief's attention. The next moment, like a magician, he pulled out that same sacred stone from the sleeve of his hanfu. The guy opened the box so abruptly that he almost broke it and cursed. It really was empty. Yue immediately threw the item onto the floor when Dao began to tease him, saying that it was an amazing coincidence. The time traveler approached the enemy, offering him cooperation in exchange for his life and the opportunity to manipulate Yuan. The warrior grinned, declaring that the Dao could not stop him, and rushed forward. But suddenly Yue realized that the young master had disappeared from sight and began to look around nervously. The next moment, Dao's mocking voice was heard. One sharp movement and Yue was thrown to the side, blood flowing from the corner of his mouth. He landed right on the wall, shattering it on impact. Yue clutched his chest and coughed, unable to understand how the young master's cultivation had reached the 9th stage of Yuan condensation. Dao just smiled broadly, crossed his arms over his chest, and said that when he counted to 3, he would kill the guy. He raised his hands up, not intending to give up at all. He took out a heavenly talisman from his pocket, waving it around, boasting that the power within it was equal to a full-force strike from a cultivator at the peak of the spiritual sea level of cultivation. Dao frowned, and at that moment, shouts were heard from the street. People heard the noise from the young master's room and rushed there to find out what was going on. Yue waved the talisman, wishing Dao a safe journey to the afterlife. A purple sphere appeared right above him. The warrior pointed his hand towards the young master, commanding lightning to kill him. The time traveler didn't have time to react. The flash knocked him off his feet. He clutched the sacred stone in his hand, not understanding what this fierce light was. Lightning, much larger than the previous one, coiled around his body like a snake, lifting the newcomer into the air. He opened his eyes wide, thinking that he would meet an inglorious end. But when he realized that he was still breathing and remained unharmed, he turned his gaze to the rainbow Yuan stone in his hand. It had split right down the middle, Yue growled, not understanding why his magic didn't kill the young master. He raised his hand again, commanding the light to kill Dao so that no one would know what had really happened today. But it seems that everything did not go according to plan. His own power went against its owner. Yue screamed silently, his eyes rolling back and steam coming out of his mouth. The time traveler leaned forward, trying to make out something in the bright light. Finally, when the light and smoke cleared, he saw that Yue was covered in soot, sprawled on the floor and not moving. He did not dare to come closer, examining the motionless enemy. Dao suggested that the criminal was killed to cover up the truth. Tinner, who was watching the events from the window, concluded that Yue was not a worthy opponent for Dao. Fortunately, Yuan had prepared the talisman in advance. The man rubbed his chin. Could this overgrown Dao really have become a genius so quickly? The Yuan spiritual stone is broken and Yue died without revealing the information. Yuan admitted that after attuning to the highest grade Yuan spiritual stone, the Dao power will only increase. Tyner worriedly asked why the groom had not personally killed the young master. Yuan replied that the time had not yet come, but it would come sooner or later. Even though the couple had protected Dao from attuning to the strongest Yuan spiritual stone, he would certainly continue to search for a way to break through to the spiritual sea stage. The girl hastened to reassure the groom that she would definitely win over the young master. Tyner's cheeks turned red as she clung to her fiancé and promised that she would do everything for him. The door to Dao's room was opened by Yan and her advisors. The girl ran up to her brother, asking what happened. It was only then that those present saw the charred body of Yue, whose mouth was frozen in a silent scream. The young gentleman showed his sister the stone, and she could not believe that such an artifact could break. One of the advisors was furious when he learned about the assassination attempt on the young master. Dao expressed hope that the elders would soon reveal the whole truth. Surely someone was behind all this and watching from the shadows. After a pause, the time traveler directly stated that the real conspirator was Yuan. He also ordered that everyone be immediately informed about the Chen family meeting to convict the criminal. The advisor tried to appeal to the young master's prudence, since they had no evidence that this man was behind all this. Dao ordered the man to be silent, as Yuan had taken action against him before, which was against the rules of the Chen family. The advisor was skeptical, but still followed the young master's advice that if there was evidence to the contrary, Dao should be prepared to take responsibility. Left alone with his sister, the time traveler asked her if she considered him reckless. Yan stated that Dao was the young master of the Chen family, and his decision was the decision of the entire family. The girl would definitely support her younger brother. She was worried that Yuan would not admit his guilt and would go against the guy. Then it would be even more difficult to convince people. But Dao reassured his sister that he was completely confident in himself. Yan was upset that the Yuan stone of the highest degree was broken. Otherwise, the Dao would have tuned into it and moved to a new stage of Yuan condensation. The girl was going to return to the mountain again and get another stone. Maybe not as strong, but the best of the remaining ones. Dao stopped his sister, saying that he had a way to fix the artifact. Taking the fragments of the stone in his hands, he mentally asked the system to rewind the time of the rainbow spiritual artifact by 2 hours. An image of a watch appeared before Yan. She stared at this miracle in amazement, and soon her brother handed her the whole stone. Dao decided to trust his elder sister and not hide anything from her, telling her about his strength. The guy became serious and said that he was going to deal with Yuan today, because he only brings destruction to the family. His sister supported him here too, assuring him that she would definitely help. The time traveler asked Yan to convince the elders, who had sided with Yuan, to support the Chen family. A little later, in the hall of the Chen family's manor, the advisors, Yuan and Yan herself, gathered for a serious discussion. Yuan asked with a smile, why was the young master going to blame him for something? Such news only made him laugh. When the girl shouted that Yuan knew what she was talking about, he shook his head, objecting that Dao was talking nonsense, publicly expressing his dislike, and was not worthy of being a young master. Yan stamped her foot upon hearing this statement. Unfortunately for her, many of her advisors supported Yuan, because the man had done a lot for the Chen family, and now he was accused of attempted murder. The elder sister could not tolerate the slander against her brother, because he was on the verge of death. But no one cared. The advisors continued to shield Yuan. A calm man, one of the advisors, tried to calm the girl down, asked her to think about what would happen if there was no direct evidence. But the warlike Yan didn't want to listen to anything else. If the young master said so, it meant he had proof. Just as Yuan noticed that Dao was still not in the hall, he suddenly appeared behind the man. The guy stepped forward abruptly and sat down on the throne. He propped his chin on his fist and asked Yuan who he thought he was and why he didn't respect the young master. The man gritted his teeth but still folded his hands in greeting, loudly greeting the boy, and the elders did the same. Dao asked everyone to calm down, and he told all the men to sit down. But when Yun went to his place, the time traveler stopped him, ordering him to stand. The man asked with a smile what happened. When the boy asked if he knew about his crime, Yuan crossed his arms over his chest and declared slander and the consequences. Dao commanded the advisor to kneel down, and Yuan became very angry, asking who he thought he was. Then Dao called his sister for help, and without further ado, the girl waved her long sleeves and flew into the air. A golden flash from her hand went towards the man. He tried to hold back the other's attack. She still managed to use her own magic to make the advisor, even against his will, fall to his knees. The man shouted forcefully at the girl, asking what she was doing. She, without feeling any pity for Yuan, merely crossed her arms over her chest, repeating the order of her brother, the young master. The man theatrically spread his arms out to the sides, drawing the elders' attention to what was happening before their eyes. One of them jumped up from his chair, accusing Yan of rebellion. The gray-haired elder supported him, exclaiming that things had gone too far. The Chen family was not a place where a girl could do things her own way. The young lady replied that she was only listening to her brother's orders and made a dangerous movement with her foot. Fiery lightning flashed in the air, and a crack formed in the floor, causing the elders to shudder. Yan asked the men with a threatening voice what their real intentions were. One of the elders, who was neutral, tried to appeal to Dao's common sense, reminding him that Yuan was a respected figure and had been protecting the Chen family for a long time. The guy replied that a respected person could not make an assassination attempt, but Yuan arrogantly said that Dao had no evidence. The elder who spoke first spoke up, exclaiming that without proof, the young master could not treat one of the Chen family members like this. The white-haired advisor added that the young master would have to answer for bringing Yuan to his knees, and the others also asked the deputy master to comment on the situation. A malicious smile blossomed on Yuan's face. He was sure that the dim-witted master had trapped himself. The blond man sitting closer to the throne asked why the question of responsibility could not be left after the investigation. His neighbor noted that the assassination attempt was a serious crime, and the feelings of the young master could be understood. Yuan spoke up, saying that these elders should remain silent. Then he shouted loudly that today's meeting could not be completed. The man tried to rise from his knees. He had never been humiliated like this before. Like an enraged bull, he pounced on the young master, threatening to strip him of his title if he did not provide evidence. Dao replied with a smile that he would do everything and called Yue to enter the hall. The elders, as one, opened their mouths. After all, they had seen the body of the young man with their own eyes. Yuan just chuckled. Considering what was said to be a lie, Yue was dead. There could be no evidence. But suddenly he trembled, hearing behind him a voice whose owner he considered dead. Yue, extremely angry, promised the man that he would remember him. Yuan, instantly sweating from the tension, turned around sharply. He probably thought that the ghost of the deceased was talking to him. The elders convinced themselves that the boy was dead the last time they saw him. Yue slowly approached the man who was frozen in horror, saying that he had acted on his behalf to kill the young master. Yuan had sacrificed Yue himself to erase the evidence. Yuan almost tripped on the steps. He tried to move as far away from this vision as possible and continued to scream that Yue was dead. The man screamed hysterically that this warrior was a fake made by the Dao, since he had used the Heavenly Thunder Talisman to smash Yue. The gray-haired elder said that he would establish the identity of the ghost himself. A few moments later, the same elder lost all confidence and now barely audibly muttered, looking straight at Yue, that it was indeed him. Yuan stepped back, the hair on his neck almost standing on end from the paralyzing shock. The time traveler pointed at him, asking what else he could say about himself. A few hours ago, when Dao stood over Yue's dead body, he shook his head, saying that he was very lucky. Having created a bright flash in his hand, the boy asked the system to turn Yue's time back 2 hours. For the first time, he tried his powers on a person. But for the sake of proof, the warrior had to be resurrected. Yu opened his eyes and sat down on the floor with a deep sigh, clutching his chest. He looked at his own hands in surprise, while sweat was pouring down his face. The young man could not believe that he was not dead. He turned to the silent Dao, shouting that it was impossible. But the time traveler just received a system warning that the time adjustment function cannot be used to influence the life and death of people. The system may explode next time. Yue, having come to his senses a little, timidly approached the young master, realizing that it was he who saved him. Dao grimly replied that it was true, and he made it very valuable, then asked if Yue knew what he should do next. Instead of words, the guy immediately fell to his knees in front of the master. Bowing to the ground and hiding his face in his hands, the boy repented of his deception and swore that now his life belonged to the Dao. He would do everything he ordered. And now, in the hall before the assembled people, Yuan tried to justify himself, saying that he never ordered Yue to do anything. All the guy's actions were based solely on his own hatred for the young master. Yue, in turn, accused the man of lying. He said that on the day Dao received the Rainbow Stone, Yuan ordered it to be destroyed to prevent the young master from increasing his power, and also gave him a thunder talisman. Little did Yue know that in addition to destroying the stone, the man would also kill his henchmen to cover up his tracks. Now the elders could not doubt such absolute evidence, and they began to accuse the man of betraying the Chen family. Yuan could not remain silent and again addressed those present, urging them not to believe Yue. The guy spat in his direction when he heard the man call himself a worthy person. Yu told the young master that Elder Yuan had committed a huge number of crimes over the years. The guy began to reveal the man's secrets, but he attacked him, activating his power. No one should know the truth. He couldn't do anything. Blood spurted out of Yuan's mouth and he was thrown away from the guy by a golden beam. Yan pinned the criminal to the wall with one graceful movement. She ordered Yue to speak, and he did, revealing that Yuan was involved in the disappearance of 2 of the greatest masters of the Chen family. As it turned out, Yuan had been lining his pockets with money all these years, profiting from the family's assets, and half of the property was stolen by him. For many years, he suppressed the young master, and his position in the family was lowered, and also developed his faction, all with the goal of completely subjugating the Chen family. When the boy called Yuan a thief, he cleared his throat and asked how the warrior would prove it. Yu took out a book from his clothes, where he wrote down all the man's crimes. Yuan trembled when he heard this and pressed himself even more tightly against the wall. Yan flipped through the book with an inscrutable face. She loudly asked if Yuan could still be on the same level as Master and Madam after all. The people who adopted him when he was still young could not have imagined that their adopted child would become a real criminal. A dangerous, fiery aura ignited around the girl. Yan promised that she would kill Yuan right here and now to rid the Chen family of the threat. The man with tears in his eyes begged her to stop. He admitted what he had done, adding that he had wanted to break the Yuan spiritual stone, assuring that he would never have aimed at the young master. The time traveler quietly but clearly ordered to kill the traitor. Obeying the order, Yan activated her power and flew towards Yuan. He fell on his back, hysterically asking the elders to save him. They tried to stop Yan, asking her to lower her hand, but the junior master immediately stopped any attempts to pardon Yuan, stating that anyone would be considered a traitor if they asked for pardon for the man. The elders had no choice but to remain silent. Yan had almost touched the point on the screaming Yuan's hand with a clot of power, but at that moment, someone's power from outside deftly moved her palm aside. The girl did not understand what had happened and deftly jumped back, leaving the sudden enemy room to maneuver. Covering the elders with her hands, Yan loudly asked who the impudent person was who dared to interrupt the execution of the sentence. One of the elders warned the girl that this man's cultivation was very strong, and he ordered Yuan to flee. Yan watched helplessly as two male figures rushed headlong towards the open door, but the helplessness was momentary. She clapped her hands and used the heavenly seal of the fairy. A majestic female figure in gold-embroidered clothes appeared directly above the girl. The fairy, stretching out her arms, walked with golden fire straight over the figures of the fugitives. The stranger tried to resist the powerful force on the run, but he underestimated the strength of Yan. And yet, the man had to leave this place. He threw the explosive straight at the fairy, who barely managed to cover herself with her hand before the explosion occurred. The image disappeared and the criminals managed to escape while the room was filled with smoke from the explosion. Dao picked up the remains of the stone, threw it in the air, and said that Yuan was a stray dog. Clenching the stone in his fist, the newcomer turned to the elders, asking whose side they were on. The men immediately found themselves on their knees before their young master, promising that they would join him. A man in a cloak and mask helped Yuan escape execution and brought him to safety. The man immediately thanked the savior, but he only silently continued to lead him somewhere. Yuan could not restrain himself and asked where they were. Finally, he got tired of it. The man said that he would leave if the stranger did not speak, but suddenly a slender girl in noble clothes appeared before them. The girl called the fugitive by name and asked where he was rushing to. Yuan was incredibly surprised to recognize Princess Yue, and the silent savior immediately took off his hood, revealing his manly, tense face and gray hair. The princess reclined in a large chair while her confidant poured tea. The girl asked if Yuan was surprised. He nodded, assuring that since the process itself had come to the rescue, Yuan would definitely repay this debt. The princess, after taking a sip of tea, interrupted the stream of gratitude and announced that the elder must help her capture the Chen family today. The princess smiled as she looked at the man's dumbfounded face. She knew for sure that Yuan had ambitions and had always wanted to take control of the Chen family. Clinking her cup against the saucer, Yue Wu added loudly that the elder had been defeated. The man flared up, starting to blame the young master's younger sister for everything. The princess only drawled that Yuan had already become a homeless vagabond. Thinking about it, Yue was even surprised by the audacity of the man who said such things. The elder believed that the changes in Dao were insignificant, because without his sister, he was completely useless. The princess furrowed her brows, ordering Yuan to stop believing the lies he was telling the others. Yu was sure that the guy would still surprise everyone with the speed of his development, because he was the descendant of a noble king, and the master's parents were great rulers. He should not be underestimated. Yuan, hearing this, clicked his tongue in irritation. The princess, after a moment of silence, asked the man to support her, especially since she only needed one thing. The elder guessed that the thing the princess wanted was the Chen family's noble king's token. Yu smiled, pleased with the man's guess. Yuan inquired what the noble king's token was used for, but the princess sharply replied that it was none of his business. All an elder needs to know is that the token is not just a proof of identity. It provides the opportunity to ascend to the heavens in one step. The girl extended her thin hand, asking what the man's decision would be. He stuttered and replied that he had to think about it some more. The very same savior ran up to him, leaning on a staff, and looked into his eyes with a murderous gaze. An aura was spreading around his figure, shining in purple hues. Yuan remembered that this was a frozen stage, but the old man said that Yan's victory was only for safety reasons. The elder immediately dropped to one knee before the princess, declaring that he was ready to serve her faithfully. Yuan narrowed her eyes predatorily, replying that it was very good. Dao, having saved the fragment of the weapon, returned to his room and asked the system to return the time of the hidden weapon to 10 hours. The hands of the large clock obediently rushed back. Looking at the hieroglyphs carved on the small bomb, the time traveler realized that the weapon belonged to the noble Chen estate. Dao was glad that the Chen family had gotten rid of the traitor. Now he could cultivate unhindered all the time. Hearing a strange voice behind him, the young master shuddered and turned around abruptly. Chen Tai smiled, asking him not to be afraid. Dao smiled happily when he met the grandfather of his predecessor and greeted him. The boy saw in his memories that the former owner of the body and this old man were very close people to each other. Young Dao's parents were rarely around due to their busy schedules, and Yan had not yet arrived at the estate, so Tai spent most of his time taking care of the boy. The child asked his guardian if he really had no talent for cultivation, and the old man assured him that this talent had not yet manifested itself, because Dao was a descendant of noble cultivator kings and was very talented. Tai patted the boy on the head, assuring him that his grandfather wouldn't lie, and the boy eagerly promised that he would continue to practice cultivation. One day, a group of people in black clothes kidnapped a young master. The criminals, carrying away the crying child somewhere, were talking among themselves. Noble kings will not leave this crime so easily. A blue glow suddenly appeared behind the men, and Tai's commanding voice was heard. The old man, using his strength, demanded that the young master be released. One of the kidnappers put his hands forward and brought them together to resist the attacks of others. He ordered the others to leave first, but the old man made a few moves, and being a powerful cultivator, he knocked out his opponent. Dao screamed and struggled, and the men realized that this stranger was very strong. Tai slammed his palms together, causing a cloud of smoke to rise, and the villains decided to play with him. The pursuer swung and threw the small body of his captive into the sky. The boy burst into tears and desperately called his grandfather for help. The criminal threw several kunai towards the boy. Dao, waving his arms, screamed with all his might, trying to somehow dodge. Tai, carefully watching the trajectory of the weapon's fall, could not allow the young master to be injured. He caught the boy, shielding him from the sharp arrows that pierced the man's back. One of the men in black ordered his accomplices to continue attacking the young master of the Chen family. Tai put his hand forward and sent a blue beam at the criminal, which immediately knocked him back. The boy clung to his grandfather, quietly sobbing. The ninja made a deft movement with his foot, ordering the old man to say goodbye to life. Tai, tightly hugging little Dao, fell to the ground, taking the full impact on himself. Quickly getting up, the old man put the boy on his feet and hid him behind his back, assuring him that no one would touch Dao as long as his grandfather was here. After that incident, Tai suffered serious injuries and took a long time to recover, but was always close to his predecessor. The man said that he had been closely watching Dao, who was faster than lightning, had grown greatly, and was worthy of being called the descendant of a noble king, asking the boy not to be left without protection. The time traveler asked if the grandfather was referring to the threat coming from the Qin estate. The old man said that Fenyan City was guarded by 3 royal families, including Chen, and there was also the Qin Manor. As long as Dao's parents were here, no one dared to cause trouble. Tai took out the box, saying that the master did not want the man to interfere in his son's affairs unnecessarily. But now, in order to see things in their true colors, Tai must give something to the master. The time traveler extended his hands and asked what kind of thing it was. Tai explained that before the lords left, he gave instructions for the day when the young master would take control of the Chen estate. Dao's fingers trembled as he asked if he could open the box. Tai warned that it had the seal of a master on it, and the box could only be opened when the young master had reached a certain level of cultivation. The predecessor missed his parents very much, so the time traveler asked Tai about it. He replied that there was no need to worry about them. After all, the parents were noble kings of cultivation. The cup shattered with a clang, spilling the remaining water around, and the servants listened with frightened expressions to Tinger's cries that the entire Chen family was held together by Yuan's efforts. The girl paced the room angrily, indignant at the unfair accusation against her fiancé. She bared her teeth, cursing the powerless young master who had nothing but his personality. Tyner turned on her heels, loudly declaring that she would go to the elders to have them abolish the position of young master. The girl heard someone calling her and turned around abruptly. She saw Yuan and immediately ordered the servants to leave the room and not tell anyone what had happened. Tiner promised that she would kill anyone who spoke out and make sure that his mortal body was buried in the ground. The rumors trembled and swore that they would not tell anyone anything. Behind their backs, Tiner approached the groom with love in her eyes. The girl began to feel the man, as if making sure that he was really in front of her, asking if everything was okay. Yuan immediately said that he came for an important reason. The bride assured him that there was no need to worry. She will definitely achieve justice. Yuan said that the priority now was to undermine the prestige of Dao and prevent it from taking root in the Chen estate. Tyner understood the groom at a glance, so she immediately asked what she needed to do. The man reminded him of the upcoming battle, which needed to be carried out immediately, since Dao was left without the Yuan spiritual stone and would not be able to comprehend the spiritual sea. Even if he achieved it, the guy would only be able to tune into an ordinary object. Tyner nodded. She would challenge the young master to a competition tomorrow. Meanwhile, Dao was meditating in his room, thinking that in this world, only the strong are respected. Becoming a noble cultivation king, he will be invincible, reaching the level of the spiritual sea. The youth's body was filled with an incredibly powerful energy of delicate blue flowers. After breaking through to the level of the spiritual sea, the energy will manifest in the dantian inside the body. The size of the spiritual sea determines the amount of chi a cultivator can hold, and this determines the strength of the cultivator. But as long as the attunement to the spiritual item is strong enough, one can change the fate of the cultivator. The time traveler received a system notification. The cultivation level has been increased. The time adjustment range has been increased to 50 years. The system is now even more useful under this condition. Previously, 5 years of adjustment was too little. Dao clenched the stone in his hand. This spiritual artifact is very strong, but this does not mean that there is nothing more powerful than it. They say that the Yuan spiritual stone increases its power over time. Dao decided to order the system to shift the time of the Yuan spiritual stone by 50 years. Sitting in the lotus position, the time traveler felt the artifact rise into the air. The hands on the clock began to move. Streams of power passed through the room. The guy felt the changes when it was all over. The stone in his hands seemed to be on fire, throwing off golden lightning. But suddenly, thick streams of air blew upward from the artifact, and Dao was surprised to see that the stone turned black after the system's actions. The time traveler looked out the window and stared in amazement at the black sky with its hurricane of clouds and lightning. It seems that this spiritual stone has influenced the weather. There is a legend that only objects above normal levels that have achieved immortality can cause thunder in both the sky and the earth. Princess Yue looked intently at the unusual sight. Against the backdrop of the blue sky, lightning was raging and thunder was rumbling in one area. She frowned, not understanding what was happening. Her close advisor immediately explained to the ruler that this phenomenon was similar to the discovery of a treasure. The man had previously encountered something similar in the imperial city. The girl wondered if this could be a token of a noble king, because history says that this thing is extremely mysterious and made of extraordinary iron. There was also confusion in other houses, as lightning was visible from all over the city. The fair-haired man realized that this phenomenon was coming from the direction of the Chen manor. His stately father thoughtfully recalled the line of the noble king with the legacy of the Chen family. He also added that these were possibly traces of the discovery of the greatest treasure, perhaps even the token of the noble king of the family. The heir perked up, asking his father what this token was that all the families were talking about now. It turned out that it was a priceless treasure worthy of cultivators at the level of a noble king. The token helps one overcome oneself. Cultivators can dream of such a thing. The artifact provides the highest mandate, and the ordinary person who receives it can rise above hundreds of thousands of others. The man said that over the past years the noble king's family line had not changed, and no outsider had seen this token. The son asked dejectedly, what to do now that the young line of the noble King Chen is in decline? Every family can seize this opportunity. The lord ordered the heir to go to the Chen estate to see the artifact with his own eyes. Meanwhile, in the estate, Chen Dao was examining the stone that had changed its color. Now, after fast-forwarding 50 years, his powers had definitely advanced. And although the artifact was excellent in its original form, it has now become much better. The time traveler decided to tune into it by sitting in the lotus position and creating a magical sphere in which he placed the stone. The process of breaking through to the level of the CC also had to be completed. A little time passed, the meditation ended, and the guy suddenly opened his eyes. He realized that the assimilation with the Yuan spiritual stone had been successful, and he was overjoyed. The next moment, Dao found himself hanging in the air in the middle of a vast blue ocean. He realized that after assimilating with the Black Yuan spiritual stone, his spiritual pool had become a vast ocean. He continued to enjoy the echoes of power when he heard someone calling him from the street. If Dao was not mistaken, it was Tinner's voice. The reckless girl ran to his estate, screaming that they must fight. and today is the day that Tiner challenges the young master to a duel. The elders who came up behind her asked Yuan's bride to be careful with her words. The girl turned around and boldly announced to the fifth elder that the matter seemed to be between Dao and her only. Let the others do their own thing. The man condemned the disrespect for the master and urged Tiner not to stand out from others just because of her position in society. She clicked her tongue and walked to the door of the manor, ordering the young master of the Chen family not to hide in his house like a turtle. The elder reminded that only the young master should choose the time for the battle. Tiner should leave immediately and stop making noise. The girl put her hands on her hips, declaring that she would scold the guy until he came out. She shouted that if Dao was a man, let him come out and defeat Tiner. The elder clenched his fists, became seriously angry, and almost rushed at the girl himself. The door slid open abruptly, and the young master of the estate himself appeared on the threshold. Tiner smiled predatorily. Finally, he dared to come out. The time traveler, crossing his arms over his chest, accepted the challenge of Yuan's bride. The fifth elder tried to stop his master, but Dao waved his hand, saying that there was no need to say anything. The young master knew what he was capable of. Princess Yue and her advisor walked slowly along the palace corridor, and Yuan ran towards them headlong. The girl stopped and looked at the man in surprise. He was in such a hurry. Was it really something urgent? Yuan happily announced his decision to send Tinger to fight. Then Dao's position would be completely destroyed. The elder would be able to return to the Chen family and help the princess get the token. The girl promised to make Yuan the master of the Chen estate if she succeeded, and she herself hurried to the Chens because an unusual phenomenon had occurred there today. The nobility of the city was already gathering on the estate grounds. The fair-haired youth waved his fan and greeted Princess Yue, who had come to the young master to collect her debts, and they gathered together in front of the large gate. Yan and Dao had already met the guests. All they had to do was climb up a small staircase. The boy was sure that he would witness the show, and the princess immediately quietly asked her advisor if he had discovered anything. The man shook his head. The phenomenon had disappeared. There was no information about the noble king's token. Tinger had already pointed her sword at Dao, demanding that the young man return Yuan. Only in this case could the girl refuse the fight. But the young master was adamant. This man was trying to kill him. What mercy could there be? The girl, without lowering her sword, noticed that it was Yue who did it, who had nothing in common with the elder. Everything Yuan did was for the sake of the Chen family. Tinger reminded him of the decline of the boy's family, saying that Yuan only wanted to revive its former glory. Dao rolled his eyes, mockingly asking if his death would allow the Chen family to prosper. Tinger stated that this death was to protect the Chen family from ridicule, since every dog knew about Dao's dismal reputation. Then, the time traveler decided to have a serious talk with the girl. He asked if she knew why Yuan sent her to the Chen family. She nodded. She was going to accompany the young master, but he disappointed her, and now she was not going to stay with him. Dao concluded that the girl had chosen Yuan and wanted to stay with him. Tinger acknowledged the youth and courage of the man who was, in her eyes, the best of the Chen family. If he becomes the main Yuan, then Tinger will gladly submit to him. The girl waved her sword in a warlike manner, challenging the young master, and the boy would not dare to run away from him. They had an agreement. Dao ordered the foolish woman to address him with due respect, but Tinger spat at the master that he was not worthy of it. The time traveler promised that he would teach Tiner good manners. The space around them shone with the energy of golden flowers. The girl raised an eyebrow and raised her sword. The next moment, she thrust her weapon forward and ran with it towards the young master. But before she had time to take a few steps, Dao disappeared from sight. Tiner was even surprised by such speed, and then the time traveler kicked the sword out of his opponent's hands. Looking at the empty palm, Tiner couldn't believe her eyes. Princess Yue guessed that the Dao cultivation had reached the world of the spiritual sea. Tiner admitted that she had underestimated the young man, who had already passed on to the next world. She accelerated and shouted that she had already reached the 7th level of the spiritual sea world, and that the Dao was no match for her. Time seemed to slow down. The guy waited for the girl to get closer and then hit her in the face with a backhand. Tiner grabbed her face, shocked by Dao's action, who, hanging over her, called on the girl to remember what dignity was. Turning into a real fury, Tiner swung her fist at the young master, threatening to kill him. Her hand was intercepted by a man's palm. Dao watched the girl dispassionately. Their forces clashed, and it seemed as if the rivals could not defeat each other. Finally, Dao was able to push back Tiner and take a step forward. He gave the girl's hand a stronger squeeze, and she stared at the man opposite her, not expecting such a reception. All confidence gone from her face, Dao asked if she now realized how strong he had become. Approaching Tyner, he gritted his teeth and called his rival a nobody. How dare she mock him? Tyner bared her teeth and tried to hit the guy in the face with her free hand. He let go of the girl and swung his leg, ordering his rival to get away. Tyner grimaced as she fell painfully to the ground, feeling cheated. She suggested that Dao took power from a powerful spiritual artifact he found when he made the transition to the world of the spiritual sea. After all, the strongest spiritual stone was broken. Tyner was furious, believing that his sister had found another artifact for him. Dao got tired of listening to this nonsense and declared that the girl had lost and the right to enter the Wu Academy remained his. Slowly standing up, Tyner promised that one day she would reach the world of the spiritual bridge and take revenge. The time traveler stopped her abruptly. Coming closer, he suddenly grabbed her by the throat, lifting her off the ground. Squeezing her thin neck tighter, the guy reminded her that he had promised the girl to teach her good manners. The next moment, he punched Tyner in the stomach, knocking the wind out of her. A blue flame flared up on the girl's chest. Black streams came out of her mouth, and she screamed in pain. Dao, considering her crazy, reminded her that the Chen family belonged to him alone. Dao, looking at the beaten Tyner lying on the ground, ordered the soldiers to throw her out the gate. They began to laugh at the naive Tyner. She was probably deceived by Yuan, who told her that the young master had not changed at all. While taking her away, one of the warriors did not spare the girl, because she had dug her own grave by treating Dao in this way. Princess Yu addressed the time traveler, saying that what he had seen today had strengthened her admiration. Dao noted her dangerous beauty when the girl asked how he managed to increase his cultivation skills so quickly, to which Dao replied that it was all thanks to the pills. Without them, nothing would have happened. While the princess was coming to her senses from the realization that the pills had not helped, a young man approached the master without removing the fan from his hands. He spoke slyly to Dao, reminding him that he wanted to see him as the head of the Chen family. The time traveler remembered that the young man's name was Yu Ming, and being from an ancient family in the city of Fengyan, he never stopped wanting his family's property. When Ming said he wanted to discuss something, Dao was willing to listen to him. The young man with a sly expression reminded him of the problems in the Chen family and suggested that Dao sell his family winery. The advisor, who heard the conversation, tried to stop Dao from making the purchase with a shout. After all, spiritual wine is a legacy left by the master and his wife. Moreover, it is now the main source of income for the Chen family. The man pointed out that without the sale of spiritual wine, the Chen household would be in trouble. Dao shrugged, turning to Ming, as he had heard. There was no point in selling the winery now. After all, spiritual wine was the main income of the Chen family. The young man clenched his teeth in anger, barely keeping himself from cursing. But suddenly, after a few seconds of silence, Dao asked how much money Ming was willing to offer.